to make requests of the company going forward. And that's,
Mitch, I have a question. What's going on here and here?
I would like to,
Can I ask my question?
I wanted to address something that Pat mentioned.
Okay.
And I wanted to respond to a comment
All right.
that I
Another
heard.
10-minute thing.
It's not a 10-minute thing. There's been a comment that the monitoring program is going to be cut way back. The proposal that the company submitted did propose a huge cutback on monitoring, and we've been in communication with the company on that, and we're going to be answering, if you read the consent judgment amendment, within the next few weeks. We actually have, now, there are going to be some reductions in monitoring because there are wells out there that have been at a consistent rate for a long period of time. But the monitoring that they propose to cut things back to is not what's going to be established. So we are going to be keeping on top of the monitoring. So I just wanted to make that comment, and Roger, I guess you can.
Yeah, and just for the people here, it's nothing personal with these two people, because they're low level. These decisions obviously got made.
They're the ones that
Yeah, well, they have to be conduit, but they're not the ones who actually made this decision. That decision was made by somebody unknown up and down the channels. The fact that the judge hasn't seen what's really going on at the site is endemic of what's wrong with our environmental protections here in Michigan. It's not that the foxes are in charge of the hen house. The foxes are the architects of the hen house.
There you go.
yeah, that's good.
You know, that's what we're, since Engler, that's what it's been. And they're just having, you know, they just have jobs. They're just doing their job. Now, maybe they could have said, you know, we're not going to participate in any secret negotiations. You know, then they would have lost their job, somebody else would have got it. But that would have made a statement. But I'm not asking them to do that. What I'm asking right now is, what criteria are you going to use to determine that this northward movement right here, which is obviously coming from here, right? I'm looking at to the south. This is the 3D plume that the company provides. We just extrude it up in Google Earth. So this is an Evergreen area here. What's going to make this turn and go east before it hits this line? And the same thing here in the deep area. This is obviously curling around, according to their map, going north. What's going to turn that around and make it go east?
Groundwater flow gradient.
Well, how did it get here then?
It had a component that took it there.
Roger, I have a hard time with the way you're depicting the plume there because it's basically obliterating everything else behind it. It's not, I mean, the dioxane is not up in the air.
What would you like me to turn off?
It's in the ground.
Well, again, you know,
I
I understand what he's saying. Again, we've had, and goes back to the point Vince mentioned earlier about numerous studies, some of which indicate there's a northeasterly flow direction, others indicate there's an easterly flow direction, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know definitively. But we're also telling you that, looking at this map here, and did you say this doesn't have all the wells on it, Sybil?
Yes.
It does not have all the
It
wells
does
on
not
it.
have all the wells.
But we worked with the company and, you know, we consult with the technical group, although I'm not saying we've got 100% agreement, but we've worked to come up with additional wells. I mean, certainly this is the DuPont circle area here. That's been a source of, source probably is the best choice of word. It's been an area of it doesn't fit Paul's conceptual model. Like Roger said, how did it get there if generally they're saying the flow is to the east? Obviously, it got up to the north there somehow. And this goes back to what Pat was saying, and what Sybil has already said. This is a complex.
Okay, well, let's look at that particular well. Here it is. This is the readings at that well. You can see it's going up. Right here. DuPont Circle, right here. These are the maximum readings per year for that well. What's the next well to the north? NW 54D.
That's a deep one and there's a shallow one, right?
Yeah, well, don't worry about the shallow one, because that's low. But look what happened to the deep one.
And
That's
we're
about,
right in the middle and we're not contaminated.
well, you're
We're on the
shallow.
Parkway. And they say that we're all in the same aquifer.
Yeah, clearly you're not.
And we're not in the same aquifer, and the people across the street with us, well, Roger's showing, there's no way they can be in the D2, and then DuPont is in D2. They just can't be. So what it is they don't know what's going on underground. It's that simple.
Well, this is about to get to the 85.
Yeah.
And this is way over 85.
Oh, yeah.
So where is this one coming from? Well, maybe from here. What direction would that be, Mitch?
Well, then we have,
Well,
I mean, we put some additional wells in.
No, this is the same aquifer.
yeah, but we're right in the middle, Roger.
I've isolated out the layer that we're concerned about.
Yeah, because they're both deep.
Something you guys haven't done. I've isolated out the layer we're concerned about.
Well, we have, I mean.
These are the wells.
Mike,
that are
do you have
in this layer
something
we're
to add to
concerned
this?
Come on, Mike, it's your turn.
I got to just a little bit. I mean, back to the amendment to the consensus in your 2009 presentation, that last slide, why you denied it. I mean, you specifically said there was no contingency plan. And what's in the amendment talks about a verification plan, but there's no discussion of contingency plan. Only if the pipeline fails that they're going to install, or if another scenario comes into play. So it's not really a contingency plan if it goes beyond the PZ. I mean, you've got the 4 to 5 wells that are going to be installed that are separated by a minimum of 1,000 feet between the points. So, I mean, an entire contamination would go right between the 2 points. One of the things Sybil said at the beginning was, it was originally thought that a protective clay layer was going to keep it from the deeper unit. Well, it turns out it wasn't as confident. That same protective clay layer, different clay layer in a sense, but a protective clay layer is what's keeping it from going to Parkway Pond. Yet we don't fully understand its stratigraphy. We've done to install wells in it. How are we going to be assured that it's not going to be going to the north when we only have these 5 points that they're looking at? And we don't even have a grasp of the real groundwater flow because the points have just been installed. And we can't really predict what the geology is going to be, because if you go to Calvin, it doesn't match the wells that are already in place. So, I mean, it doesn't have that protective of health, safety, welfare, and the environment. I mean, there's no contingency plan, really, other than they're going to do an investigation and do a feasibility study, which they've already done, that said it's going to cost a lot of money to do active cleanup. I mean, how is the feasibility study going to be different if they're a half a mile away from their infrastructure now that they really can't address? And it's a long diatribe.
You know, again, we had multiple studies, one of which done by the city indicating usually flow.
I agree with that, but I mean,
So we came up with a monitoring well network and triggers in the event that some of these wells concentrations I think we got 20 part per billion triggers in some of the wells, Sybil?
Yeah, the perimeter wells.
Because using Paul's conceptual model, they shouldn't even see 20 parts per billion.
So you're talking about these wells here on the perimeter.
yeah, I mean, they're separated by 1,000 feet at the closest distance along the perimeter. So, and if you go further east, I mean, there may be 4,000 feet between the wells. So, I mean, it's not a tight monitoring network.
There's another well here. And
But taking those into account, you still have 1,000 feet minimum between the monitoring
Right,
points.
but we do have this line of wells here.
But that's still, I mean, yeah, if it gets there, you may
Well,
have to go to dispute resolution to get additional. But I mean, looking at the consensus, pretty much every component of it is followed up with, thou shalt do this, or we can go to dispute resolution.
Well-
So I mean, yeah, I know it's an agreement, and what 201 is written to and what is in court aren't really the same thing. I mean, the court was able to eliminate the Northwest Supply Well out of this whole problem, which is in 201. So, I mean, they selectively pull out what they want, so why can't we selectively get out?
Well, because frankly, you know,
I mean,
if we ran the risk, if we went, you know, we denied the plan, Paul filed suit to get the judge to accept or adopt the plan. We could have gone to court and fought about it. In fact, we were geared up to do that, and we're on a parallel path to talk and see whether there was any room for compromise. And it was our collective analysis, and I'll tell you who the decision makers were, if you're worried about secrecy right there. I mean, Sybil and I were involved, Manel Rolfe, our division chief, my supervisor was kept in the loop, obviously, and then Celeste Gill and her management from the Department of Attorney General. We were all involved in that analysis, and the collective opinion of the group was, if we could come up with something that we could deem protective, realizing that the risk was the court, given all the history at this site, could impose something worse, i.e. what Paul originally proposed. So I'm here to tell you, what we got isn't perfect. I think it's better than what we might have gotten in court for a lot of, it would have taken a lot of resources to get us whatever we would have got going back to court to fight about that. And I mean, the judge, you know, Roger's got concerns about what we told the judge and what we had. I mean, the judge knows he issued the remediation order in the 5-year plan and said, thou shalt clean up Evergreen by, what was it, July 2005. And he also knows that they didn't retain that. And, you know, there was, I think, discussions in chambers about that, and the word we got was that it wasn't, we weren't likely to prevail if we challenged that. So,
Because the criteria was mass removal.
well, let's, you know, all the history at this site includes, let's look at the unity decision, you know. If we could have got consensus in the community, for example, that the DEQ's proposed plan on attacking the plume in 3 different parts or places, instead of obviously
We have room until 10 o'clock.
Mitch, you brought this up at the last CAR meeting, and you're wrong. That the citizens opposed attacking the major part of the flume. We wanted remediation in
I'm
the
telling
area
you,
between
we got
Maple
during
and
public
Wagner Road.
comment,
And we didn't
petition
get
signed
it.
by over 400
So I
citizens
don't know
saying
why
we
you
don't want
keep saying
pipelines
that.
and monitor wells in our neighborhood, in direct reaction to the DEQ proposal to say we want to attack the leading edge of the plume, we want to purge it at Maple Village, and we want to purge it at Wagner Road. The judge saw that. The judge acknowledged that in the unity order and said, clearly, DEQ's assertion that it's feasible to do this doesn't comport with what the citizens in that area are telling them.
But look where the major contamination is. It's between Maple and Wagner.
I don't dispute the fact that there's a
So why aren't they cleaning up this major contamination
What the
like
court-
we asked?
Excuse me, because of what the court ordered.
Why didn't the judge order this?
You'd have to ask him.
Because he didn't see something like this that says, hey, judge, this is the major contamination. Let's clean it up.
The judge saw the maps that indicate that there's mass in between.
I hadn't seen this.
Let's see, is there anyone else that hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet? I've seen hands that I've already seen, so I guess we'll go to, this one over here.
A philosophical future question. Worst case scenario, what's the best guess how soon it reaches the river so that the city can do some planning for alternate provision of water supply? Are we talking 25 years, 50 years? How soon is it going to reach the river?
Are you talking about
Right here, there's
toward
about-
Barton Pond, or are you talking about east?
Just the river, if it doesn't reach Barton Pond, it will reach the river, which, you know, goes down. I mean, it's already going into Honey Creek, which is going into the river above Barton Pond, right?
Below Barton.
Well, nobody drinks the water
Honey Creek.
south of Barton.
But we're already talking about the other plume that is going to can't be developed out there because they won't be able to meet the county standards to drill wells. So I'm just saying, as a futurist, and it's gone on for so long, and it's going to keep expanding. I mean, it just is, whether it's 100,000 or 20,000 or 85, it's going to keep going. How long before it moves?
Have we seen any projections?
I can't.
Can anybody do, I mean, Roger, anybody
I
have
don't
a
know if Mike-
computer?
Mike, do you remember?
Previously,
Well-
there's been about 1 foot per day, but I mean, if you look at MW30D, that had detection at 93, and it's showing up in the Northwest Supply Well in 2001, so you get about 8 years and 9,000 feet of travel, so that's almost about 3 feet per day. So it's been at 98D at 10 parts per billion for 5 years. We can look at a minimum of 1,800 feet of migration past 98D as a conservative side, and it may be more like it's almost a mile past 98D that there's no wells to detect it, or at least hasn't been detected any wells. We don't really know where it's going, and it may be within a few thousand feet of the river. I mean, this is Paul's data. A little 5 minutes worth of analysis. Anything that has a concentration in it, it's going to move past that point. Much like 41D on the western side, it's had 40 parts per billion in it for over a decade.
Okay, so the computer model, how soon before it reaches the
I mean,
Which one?
10 to 15 years, or less. I mean, there's not enough modern wells to say where it's going, so it's hard to say.
I mean, that's all I want. I mean, just a pilot, I mean, I was around when it was only going to take, it took 5 years to find it, and then it was going to take 5 years to clean it up, and that was 15 years ago.
I mean, I guess that's the question. When's the downgrading investigation? Second phase of the downgrading is going to begin to predict where it's going to vent to the river. Because again, 98D's been sitting there with concentrations for 5 years, and at a foot a day or 2 foot a day, you know, it's 3,600 feet past 98D. And I mean, that's with 9,000 feet of migration so far.
Yeah, here's the well Mike's talking about. This is 98D, and here's the closest part to the river. That's about a mile. So 5,000 days.
It's only a half mile to Allen Creek Drain.
That's
for
15 years.
98D. So the time to do this downgrading investigation is getting a lot shorter.
Well, it might be quicker because there's a lot of artesian conditions starting right about here. And once it gets to those, it's going to flow a lot faster than it does in the ground. And that might be just a few feet above the water table. I mean, we can go all around.
Gradient's going to get steeper because there's a significant topography. So I mean, again, the downgrading investigation and that potential impact to basement was not addressed in the exposure mitigation. And it doesn't have decades to go for the investigation. It's going to take, several years to complete and now analyze and grasp what it needs. I mean, it only says that it needs to be done, but not the when.
No, thank you, that answers my question, because I was going to say, at some point, we're going to reach the oh shit moment, and if we haven't, excuse my ordinary language, but, and if we haven't done any planning for when it's going to happen.
Help me understand what, I mean, Barton Pond is the most concerned from a drinking water standpoint, but are you saying?
Is this good for the ecology of the river?
At concentrations below the groundwater surface water interface criterion, which is that 2,800 that we've been talking about, it should be protective of the most sensitive receptors. In this case, I think it's based on aquatic organism
It's
receptors.
going to dilute enough as it flows down and goes into Ford Lake and this into.
Well, I mean, the city discharges dioxin contaminated water from their landfill downstream of Barton Pond. What's that?
Without treating.
Without treating. Yes, ma'am.
What happens if Gelman goes out of business
or goes bankrupt, or moves away, or what protections?
Well, the question is what happens if Pall-Gelman goes out of business in the future, or bankrupt, or whatever. Until we had this third amendment, we had no protection from that. We now do have a financial assurance mechanism. Actually, it's in the process of being worked out, but it's part of the agreement that they have to, they're doing what we call a corporate guarantee, and we have to reevaluate that on a yearly basis, I believe. It's based on a 5-year projection of what their operation and maintenance costs are for 5 years. So they have to meet a certain financial standard to show to us that they have the financial ability. So going forward, they have to maintain that, and that's a legal requirement, which we normally have in our agreements, our legal agreements these days, but in 1992, when this consent judgment was originally ordered, we did not have that protection. Now, Pall Corporation, which is the parent of Pall Life Sciences, is, I think as Roger will tell you, is quite flush and is doing quite well. But we know, based on what we've seen recently, the economy can change, so we do have that protection that that money would then become available to us to run the cleanup, or to have somebody else run the cleanup if something happened to them.
Mitch, you said that these prior studies that show that it's going northeast are being discounted now. This is,
I don't recall saying that.
well, there's only one study that's showing it's going east.
There's 2.
No, there's
Falls
only
in
one.
the cities.
Well, we don't have the cities.
Excuse me?
We don't have the cities on the map. But if you look at this is Paul's own study that shows where the E is going. One of their studies. And here's the other one. Both of these showing that it's going northeast or east-northeast. So if we look at DuPont Circle here, which has got high concentrations, and we look at the very next well next to it, northeast or north, it's also going up, about to be over 85 parts per billion. That's consistent with their prior studies that show that it's going north or northeast.
Well, and we have new monitoring wells farther north from there that are currently non-detected, and we're going to be getting water level information. So, again, we're going to be monitoring it. We don't have guarantees to offer, but...
Well, that's the problem. This is like the plan in Japan. It shouldn't happen, but if it does happen, it's pretty disastrous. Not like Japan, but like losing 80% of your water in a city. That's pretty disastrous. So you have to be extra protective. And that's why they have the standard of 34 parts per billion instead of 85 if it might make its way to a water source. So why is 34 not being applied here when you have evidence that this is really happening? Are you going to be sued someday as the state? Because I'm telling you now, we've got data that they show, and they're going to tell you this. If they're going to say, well, the state allowed us to do this. Look, we gave them analysis that showed it's going northeast, and we gave them the data that shows them that 45, it's going up the DuPont Circle, the very next well is going up. The state should have been doing their due diligence to make sure that we didn't allow this to happen. There's a perception in the community that the state allowed this to happen in the early days. And it's happening all over again.
Well, a couple of reactions to that. The 34 part per billion criterion that Roger's talking about is a concentration. It's a groundwater, surface water interface.
That would apply in this area.
Instead of 20,
It would apply if the groundwater discharges to a surface water that's used as a source of drinking water. If the groundwater discharges in close proximity to that surface water that's used as a source of drinking water. The difference, the reason, and I'm not an expert in this, but we did a little homework on it, and I'll attempt to answer that. I think I disagree with the representation in terms of the 34 versus 85, Roger, and that is it's based on a different it's either a different exposure scenario or a different groundwater.
Well, let's use 4.5, because if in fact, the EPA standards were able to be ratcheted down as fast as they were ratcheted up within months.
I know EPA standards. You mean if EPA promulgates an
Yeah, I mean, back when it went from 3 to 77, that didn't take 2 years. That was like bang.
Oh, that was
ratchet right
already-
up.
That was the state legislature.
It's never gonna ratchet down that fast, but let's say it did. It may be down to 4.5 or 12 parts per billion. Then, instead of 2,800, what should it be?
Are you talking about groundwater surface water interface?
For the expanded prohibition zone, yeah.
Well, you know, if the state generic residential cleanup criteria goes down some lower number than it currently is, we're gonna have to evaluate that. We wanted to make sure that there was a reopener provision in the consent judgment to address that, because,
With that, Mitch, with the new 201 rewrite that was signed in December,
yes.
I mean, within that law, it had that within 2 years, the criteria table would be reevaluated. So, I mean, does that have that potential opening? Because all we're talking about is the
Yeah.
cancer slope criteria that's in a table, so it's not like there has to be, I mean, it's been peer reviewed by.
Yeah, I think the
dozens of
department is
times.
going to
It's in
undertake
that
efforts
process.
to promulgate new cleanup criteria
So, I mean-
based on the law and the current, all the algorithms in the law.
And
and the
potentially,
rules.
in less than 2 years, it could change, because, I mean, it's only a value in a table that needs to change, and it goes from 85 to 4.
And we recognize that, and that's why we have a provision in there for reopener. Yet we couldn't, we don't have the authority to speculatively enforce potential criteria. So
Well,
that's,
it's, I know you're constrained by the 201, but I mean, there's still the EPA's review that says 3.5 at a 1 in 100,000 risk is.
they don't have an LCL though.
I
So where's our authority to enforce any of that?
guess in the public health nuisance. I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
And, we could have tried our luck in court with that, for sure. And again, I'll say our collective analysis was, if we were to make that argument, it was a gamble that we weren't willing to take.
yeah, I mean, I guess.
We reserve the right in the consent judgment to petition the court to apply a lower promulgated state cleanup criterion when and if that exists. And I think that's the best we could have done legally.
Yeah. But could, I mean, I guess even looking at the agreement, I mean, pretty much everything says, we'll pump until we can demonstrate that we're gonna meet the no expansion objective. I mean, I can create a model right now that says everything's done. Add some dispersion, diffusion coefficients that can't be refuted, and I can demonstrate it's done right now. And why do you think Paul's not gonna have Devin he's probably running the model right now to demonstrate and write the letter for you.
Because we aren't gonna buy what a model says, we're gonna.
It doesn't say
Yeah, but-
anything about not buying it, it just has to be
Sure it
presented.
does.
and
It
then
says
it's
there's
a
gotta be a
resolution.
compliance monitoring network, and if any of the wells that aren't supposed to exceed 85 do exceed 85, they're in violation, they gotta pay a penalty
Or they go to
and pull
dispute
it back.
resolution.
Or what?
Or they go to dispute resolution and start the whole process over.
I tried to flow chart the logic in the term sheet for the eastern, just for the eastern system, then I got tired of doing it. And this was the logic that the state's lawyers allowed to be put in place. Maybe it's because of the statutes, but, I mean, if they go through all this process, well, that's another 20 years. And
Well,
like Mike says, there's always a dispute. Well, even if you can't decide that it always goes to dispute resolution, then it's back in court, which, of course, the judge doesn't get to see everything he needs to see to make a proper decision in court. So, the whole system is weighted against the public and the citizens. It's just another way to transfer costs and risks to the public, and I don't think that's right.
Yes, sir.
Something that I should have said a while ago, but I've been kind of thinking about it this whole time. I went to a movie showing last night by Clean Water Action, a movie called Gasline. It was a very interesting movie. One line specifically from it really stood out to me. The individual making the movie, the filmmaker, said he was driving through this country where they were doing frag gas mining, and different citizens were having different health problems, and there was really no regulation of the gas industry. And he said something to the effect of, I feel like I'm driving a car from the 1800s. There's no airbag, there's no seat belt, there's no protection. And that's what we're driving right here is a car from the 1800s. The comment that I wanted to make is hopefully an empowering one. At the end of the day, you work for us. And, you know, of course, there's a few channels that we first go through in order to instruct your actions. But I want to remind the citizens here that it is incumbent upon us to send the right leadership to direct your actions in the right way. I think, you know, there's a lot of layers to this, but one of those layers is the public process, and we need to make sure that we're sending people to Lansing who are going to represent our interests when it comes to things like this. And we need to make sure that the people that we've already sent there know how we feel. Because if they don't know how we feel, or if we don't send the right people there, then you know, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality will continue to be, you know, instructed in ways that are not favorable to our opinion. The other thing I'll say, and I'm not making the connection to this project at all, just an observation, is that there was an individual from the Department of Environmental Quality, the Office of Geological Surveys, so probably not your department. They're in charge of monitoring the gas mining operations in the state of Michigan. Their budget is funded by the revenue that the gas and oil companies make. We need to make sure, as citizens, again, when we send people to Lansing, we're going to make sure that our airbags work and that they're not deficient in very critical ways. So I'm not saying that this is the case here. I haven't done enough research in this instance, but we need to be vigilant. And when we go to the polls and when we pick up our phones, we need to be you know, making sure that we're holding our elected officials accountable. And you know, I guess that's all I'll say.
You also should introduce yourself. It's a nest introduction.
Oh, sorry. I'm Yusuf Rapi, and I'm a Washtenaw County Commissioner. I represent central and southeastern Ann Arbor. So I don't think my district is really affected at all. But I'm also yeah, right, exactly. That's right. Yeah, I do drink city water. And, I care about the environment. This is an important issue. Obviously, I'm just merely pointing out that the district that I represent is kind of.
You are affected by that, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not. Yeah, I'm absolutely not disputing that. I'm just geographically situating the district that I represent, and I serve on a card with some of these fine people here today. So, just hi.
Yep.
Thank you. I just have one additional question. As a contingency plan, if it does reach the river above where Ann Arbor draws its drinking water, does anyone ask Paul if they would be willing to install treatment technology in the wastewater treatment or in the water treatment plant that would treat for wastewater dioxide down in non-tech?
I think there's been some discussion of that.
Is that a capability that we have?
I think that's possible.
I mean, you've got treatment technology to treat it right now, so, you know, that might, if that contingency needs to be addressed, and, you know, that might be one of the things they look at in a feasibility study.
Let me phrase it a different way. Has anyone just thought of asking them if they would be willing to install technology like that as a precautionary measure?
I haven't thought about it personally, and I'm, I guess, thinking out loud here, I'd be a little reluctant to do that because that might be interpreted as some form of approval to let the plume expand there, and that's not our objective at all.
I think we should put appropriate caveats in there that they, you know, they wouldn't change it, they would be willing to do it. Or maybe at the wastewater treatment plant where the city's pumping and dumping it up.
Well, if you do that, then you have to protect all these soil properties here too.
Okay, you had questions?
Did anybody ever come up with an estimate of cleanup? Was there ever a number put together? You know, I know that we're not talking about a full cleanup anymore. Did anybody ever estimate the cost of a real cleanup?
Question is, did anybody ever estimate the cost of
It's been
what we would
published.
term a full cleanup? You know, we had it in the feasibility study, there
It's
was.
been published in a, what's the name of the document?
That's mine.
Oh, okay, that's right.
There's been a hydrogeological journal or something like that where Farsad and Brody published what the costs were. And it works out to be about $1 million a year. For a $2 billion. Well, I haven't seen that. That might count the lawyers.
Okay, we're gonna have to say we're gonna be done in about 5 minutes so that we can get the equipment out of here to get out of the room. So last couple questions, Vince?
Maybe Roger can help on this. There's been an ongoing question about the marshy area contamination, and if there is the potential for high levels of dioxin in the marshy area to be recontaminating the groundwater, so that we're basically using groundwater to clean up the land contamination in the marshy area. My understanding is the last time that was tested, the marshy area had very high concentrations. But no cleanup effort has been made in that marshy area.
That's not true. I mean, they do have a purge well, I mean, because of the nature of the, there's a peat layer and a sand and gravel layer. They're purging about 5 gallons per minute. They've been doing that since 1997. I can't, Roger can probably bring up the concentrations for me. They're
Very high.
It's lower than it was. It's a relatively small area. They are going to keep purging that well, and
why don't they take the soil and clean the soil?
Well, that would be
That's
require
not the soils
wetland
we're really
permits
concerned
for
about.
one thing. It would be, I don't know.
Is it part of because of the division of labor in the state organization that you're water and that would be soil?
Well, it would.
No, it's not related to
No,
that.
I mean, that's not, I mean, we oversee that, but
Roger,
for
do you
them to
remember
do
last-
that, they would need a wetland permit, for sure.
Measurement of that?
Well, they're in the, probably in tens of thousands, but the real soils we're worried about are the soils that have been sampled for over 10 years. Maybe you can address that. How come, did you discuss sampling the soils before you made this decision?
They have to demonstrate to us that that is not going to be a continuing source that would cause an expansion of the agreed upon extent of the plume. And I know that there was one sample about 6 feet deep that was relatively high. Don't remember right now what that was, but it has been studied, and
All right, this one right here.
they did do soil removal early on. They removed a lot of the higher concentrations. There are some heavy soils in the area where the water doesn't percolate through easily. So
These are the soil samples projected at the same 1 part per billion equals 1 meter as all the other bar charts you see.
Okay,
So
gentlemen,
this is what's still in the soils as far as we know because they have been sampled for over 10 years.
sir, you had a question?
Two questions. What is prohibited in the Prohibition Zone, and what is the pipeline for? What does that do?
the new pipeline?
Yes, what is either pipeline? What are they
The
for?
Prohibition Zone is essentially restricts the use of groundwater for drinking and for other uses as well. I mean, there are a few exceptions.
Okay.
But the pipeline is to allow them to not to have to use the reinjection wells at the Maple Village Shopping Center. I don't know if you remember that section I talked about, because of the problems they have with the reinjection. So by connecting that relatively short piece there, they'll be able to extract that groundwater and send it into the pipeline, which then goes back to their plant on Wagner Road.
Okay.
And with that,
Thanks.
I think we need to...
Okay, everybody that's stayed to the bitter end, thank you very much for your attendance and participation. Again, we thank you for it. Sorry we couldn't provide you answers that were entirely palatable. Thanks again. Good, how are you?
We've notified you. It's really easy to do. That woman had a good point. Thank you. Angling. Well said, as always, man. You know, he's you know Vince? Yeah. He's a young man, but he's outstanding. Not a young man.
Someone who can stay awake late.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and who has lots of energy. And the willpower. There's not a drink. Yeah. Oh, that's me. I can drink right up to 6. I'm so lucky. Yeah, I get it. That's right, yeah. No, you know what it is? I'm just walking along and sometimes I don't ready to walk. Oh, you can beat that. But you're doing a good job. No one's keeping a close eye on you, because you're busy with other things, but everything I hear is really like,
We better keep an eye on it. This moves towards the party.
well,
This is an issue for everyone, whether or not it goes anywhere.
and then I'll need your support on
River and
be
interested in.
This meeting?
Hard will have, oh, yeah, this is the
next meeting, May 2009.
Oh, it's too expensive. That's one of the things that
Yeah.
some of the residents.
I know, that's a big problem.
Is he elected? Okay, so
Sheldon makes a lot of decisions without anyone. You could hire a master to help him figure out some of the stuff, but he doesn't do that.
is it your guys?
In fact, it's on his budget. In fact, he has $5 million that he can ask or demand Paul pay him because they're already in violation. And so being in violation, he is allowed to demand that money. And he's decided not to do that. He says, I'm holding it over their head. Well, he could use that $5 million, hire a master, get educated. Look at what Roger's doing with these 3D graphs and these three-dimensional models. Actually get a handle on what's going on.
Do I win the lottery?
Sheldon doesn't know what he's doing. Sheldon does a lot of stuff in private. They have private communications between Paul and the DEQ that the public is not involved in. And that's one of the big gripes with it. There's a public decision, but it's all being done in private. Because the judge has granted this thing. And he's pulled it into his court and he won't let it go. And he won't do the right thing in hiring a master.
What's it?
An expert. He could hire an
expert to teach him.
To advise him. Or more than one. He could have a geologist and a toxicologist sitting next to him saying, well, geology is hard for this site because it's how the geologists describe it. It's like a spaghetti maze underground. All these different seams of clay and seams of gravel and seams of sand. And so the plume is going and it just goes into these weird divisions that are hard to predict because there's a lot of, we're a glacial till. We're a glacial till in Ann Arbor, that's why it's hilly. So the till means that all the soil was pushed down here and just makes a real mix of all kinds of soils. And so it's very hard to predict where these flows are going to go. And like I was saying, there is an MSU professor who's looked at drinking water wells, existing wells, and looked at flows in those wells. And his models show the plume going towards the river, but also going towards Parkway. It's a splay of that. Now his study is not complete. He's just, in fact, people asked him to hurry up and do Washtenaw County to get this contamination. So he went in and did that. But his preliminary data, you guys might get from his geologist. The data does show this plume could go very easily. And this moving this Prohibition Zone north is very ominous for me. I mean, it's like a 40% increase to the river.
Those properties have
I don't
Oh, that's
Yes. It can be captured for education.
They fight us on some stuff.
The city is the ones about that. And then they.
well, we could form a nonprofit that actually does, monitoring and tracking Rogers. That's interesting thought. He comes to meetings. He told me that, this between us, he told me that. Open the camera. This is the city.
Why do they have more? That was back then.
It's like, hey, we don't want to know.
What I told
The city has a ordinance that says, hey, we only accept water from
He's actually gone to the environmental commission and they have very long detailed explanation. Well, getting worn down.
I'll go and ask him to talk to you.
He's got a well, our elected officials.
We're tough. It's a tough one. We need a big change. We need a big shake-up, shake it out. I met with the people.
Clean elections.
Yeah, we do.
We need clean elections where we have
I met with the
funds
developers.
for independent corporations.
They're really against this convention.
Absolutely.
And their reasons are really, really good. The average price, in fact, Janice told me Janice, good, and she should never does it.
Well, her grounds were the fact that the city was going to retain and manage
Oh, very bad. Because if it
And
goes
also the
bad,
financial responsibility.
if it goes bad, we're stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't concerned with the fact that it was being built private.
Right. And that pretty much is, I think a lot of people come to that conclusion, and the thing would be, no one would buy our property at the cost of it. Because if anybody would, it would have been Mark, it would have been those people.
Thank you for coming, Mike.
Here, we're gonna get together, I'm gonna come visit you. As
I
I
know,
start to campaign,
when you first started wanting to campaign, what did I tell you?
watch the money.
Watch
the money.
Watch the money.
Watch the money.
Watch the money. Too many silos of money, and the DDA has too much power.
Agreed.
And
I agree to all that.
And my personal concern was the Gelman pollution.
Do you know Yosef? He's elected now to
I did.
count.
Yep.
Good to meet you.
So
It's still running, I don't know if you want.
Okay, that's fine.
I was afraid maybe there'd be a riot at the end or something.
Yeah, right.